four key concepts. So one is the stepped up basis after death. Two, when you sell your residence, there's a capital gains tax exclusion that really anybody can take advantage of. 3, 1031 exchanges if you have a rental property or commercial property. And then 4, another key concept is charitable remainder trusts. Let's now talk about the stepped up basis, or as I like to call it, the get out of jail free card. Now it comes at a cost. Someone has to pass away for this.
So again, basis, price you paid. If you bought the asset and you sell the asset, you have the capital gain. You have to pay the capital gains tax upon your passing, if and only if the asset is in your estate, and it usually is. Then we get this thing called the stepped up basis, which means the basis, regardless of the price you paid, increases to reflect the market value of the asset on the date of your death. So if you paid $400,000 for your house, that's the cost basis. Now it's worth $3 million. If you sell it before you pass away, before the first death, massive capital gains. At the first death, if you're a couple, the basis goes up, it steps up to reflect the market value. The new basis becomes $3 million. If the surviving spouse then wants to sell it for $3 million, sell it for 3, subtract the new basis of 3, 0 gain, no tax. The structure of your trust for a married couple affects the calculation of the stepped up basis. At the first death, whether you have this thing called an AB trust or not, the structure of your revocable trust for a couple is directly impacted by the analysis about cost basis, because the first death for community property, everything gets the stepped up basis. Stock, real property, everything. At the second death, if you have what is generically called an AB trust, only half of the assets get another stepped up basis. There's an alternative structure to the trust that allows for a second stepped up basis for everything. So where a little time has gone by since you created your trust, it's always worth it to take a fresh look at the structure and make sure it makes sense. Because again, getting a second stepped up basis can save a small fortune in capital gains tax.
And I think one, your residence. When you sell your house, if it's your residence and you live there for at least 2 of the last 5 years, if you're single, the first $250,000 in gains is not taxed. So if you bought your house for $500,000, you're single, you sell it 2 years later for $750,000. That's a $250,000 gain, but you pay 0 capital gains tax. You only have to pay capital gains tax if you sell it for more than that. One tip is if you are in a long-term relationship with someone, you live in the house together. Well, if you get married and you add your significant other to the title, all of a sudden you just doubled that to $500,000. Let's say you own 2 properties and one's a rental and one's a house, but you want to sell one in a couple of years. Well, maybe you move into that one and make that your residence. And there's other ways you can make something your residence without necessarily living there full time. And then all of a sudden you get this $500,000 if you're a couple, or $250,000 exemption. So now let's talk about rentals. So 1031 exchanges, and I have the term kick the can until you're gone. If you own a rental property or a commercial property that's generating income, you can do what's known as a 1031 exchange. So if you sell a rental property, if you have a big gain, there's no homeowner's exemption. There's no $250,000 or $500,000 exemption. If you don't live there, by definition, you don't get that. So let's say you own a duplex or a fourplex. If it goes up in value, whatever that increase in value is when you sell it versus what you bought it for, you can lose a third of that to the IRS unless you do a 1031 exchange. Now, a 1031 exchange tax code that allows for like-kind exchanges. So if you're selling an income property and you buy another income property with it and you follow the right steps, you need to set this up before you sell. You need to get the process going. You don't have to pay capital gains taxes. Now, you do have to buy other real estate for similar value. But let's say you have a fourplex that's worth $2 million and you bought it for $500,000 years ago. If you sold it and just took the cash, you could pay $500,000 in capital gains taxes. If instead you take that and you put into another real estate investment that qualifies, you pay 0 capital gains taxes. Now that new real estate investment carries your old cost basis over. So if you ever sell that, you would still have that huge capital gains tax issue. So let's say you own a property that's very high maintenance and you're dealing with tenants and you want to get out of the tenant management business. Well, you can sell and buy into a larger real estate investment where maybe you have no management role, but it's a way to change your investment without taking that capital gains tax hit. And I mentioned kick the can down the road. This is why a lot of real estate families end up with extraordinary wealth. You do 1031 exchanges nonstop and you can trade into other properties. It can be higher value, lower value. You build up cash flow. And then when one parent passes away, you get the stepped up basis. And all of a sudden, if the family wants to cash out, they can because they kept avoiding.
That was the can that was kicked down the road.
Yeah, there you go. They kick the can down the road. I like that. Let's say you want to sell your residence and it's gone up more than $500,000. So you face significant capital gains tax exposure. Hey, maybe you consider converting that to a rental before you sell it. Maybe you rent your house out for a year and a half, 2 years. Yes, you have to wait a little bit, but then all of a sudden, maybe you can sell it and not take a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 capital gains tax hit and put all that money to work for your family. But let's talk about stocks and some of the tools available there and a charitable remainder trust.
So let's say you have some stock, by the way, or it could be real property that you bought many years ago, an asset that has appreciated hugely in value. But maybe that asset is not giving you much income. You'd like to have more income. You may or may not have a charity you want to support. Let's say you have $500,000 worth of stock for which your cost basis is $5,000. And we see that around here. So if they were to sell, they would have that massive capital gains tax. And then they'd reinvest the money that they netted after paying tax, and then they create an income stream for themselves. So the alternative is we create a charitable remainder trust. The stock is transferred into the trust. The trust sells the stock. Now, because upon the death of the beneficiaries, mom and dad, because that money is all going to go to a tax-exempt organization, there's no capital gains tax. We're avoiding all of the income and capital gains tax implications. So if it sells for $2 million, capital gains tax might have been massive, but the $2 million is then invested and gives you a rate of return. We set the rate of return. You can say 5% of the value of the assets in the charitable trust comes back to you annually as a distribution for the rest of your life. So you're turning an illiquid asset into an investment with no capital gains tax exposure to dramatically increase your level of income for the rest of your life. Many nuances here. You can choose you choose the charity that ultimately gets the money. Many individuals use the extra income that they didn't have before as a result of the charitable remainder trust. They take that extra income and they buy a life insurance policy and they put it into an insurance trust. Again, second level planning, but that's a way of replacing the wealth that is now not going to go to your kids because it's going to go to the charity. So CRTs are a very creative, available, workable approach to sell assets without capital gains tax exposure and to create income for life.
I hope these tips on capital gains tax were super helpful. Leave comments, questions. If you're watching this recording, like the video, share this with others. Easy to contact us. Gilfix.com, 650-493-8070. So it's very easy to find us.